What's up, heroes? When you hear the words console gamer, your immediate thought will be either PlayStation, Xbox, or Nintendo. These three companies have dominated the console market over the years, but they aren't the only ones within said market. In fact, countless of other third-party companies, both big and small, have tried to enter the space or reintroduce themselves, but to no real success. From the attempted revival of Atari to tone-deaf pricing and consoles that may or may not even exist, today we're going to take a look at a couple of home video game consoles you may have not heard of, how they tried to market themselves in a space already so heavily dominated, and why all of them ultimately failed and were completely forgotten. Let us begin with our first console on the list, the Atari VCS. I'm sure many of you have at least heard of the name Atari. It's a name as old as time in the gaming world. After all, they were the pioneers of home video game consoles with their releases of the Atari Home Pong in 1975 and the Atari 2600 in 1977. However, in more recent times, Atari is no longer a household name like it once was, thanks in part to the constant underwhelming releases they had before completely exiting the space in 1993. Although they decided to shift their focus from consoles to just video games, after 25 years they decided that it was time to re-enter the console market. In May of 2018, Atari started an Indiegogo campaign with the goal of raising $100,000 in order to build the all-new Atari VCS. This console was a Linux-based system that was marketed as an all-in-one device, one where you can play both classic and modern games, more on that in a second, stream entertainment, build your own games, and even install Windows on it if you so please. Of course, this campaign was a major success, being funded 2,700% in just the first week alone. That's $2.7 million right there, and ending off with a total amount of $3.05 million raised. Gamers were obviously excited about being able to relive some cherished childhood memories in a more modern manner made by the ones that pretty much started it all. However, when you think about it more carefully, you come to realize that this console was really nothing more than a low-end to mid-end PC. That is how they were trying to market themselves after all for the price of $300, at least for the collector's edition. The base boring console was only $200, but it's worth mentioning you're not getting a controller, which there are two of by the way, both costing an additional $60. And although the initial campaign began in 2018, backers and consumers didn't receive their orders until late 2020 to early 2021, as Atari constantly chose to delay the console in order to upgrade the current hardware. Either way, let's say you decided to buy the base console and only one controller. That'd run you at least $260, which by the time it actually released would only be $40 cheaper than the Xbox Series S, a much more advanced and capable machine that could pretty much do everything the VCS was trying to, but much better. And on the topic of modern games, Atari mentioned that along with classic retro games, you could also play modern games, but I think that was more ambiguous marketing than anything else. As to me at least, it seems that when they said modern games, I think what they really meant were games made in current year, as you weren't really going to be able to run something like Call of Duty or even Fortnite on this machine. By that definition, I can make a little 8-bit pixel game inspired by Pong and call it modern because it was made in 2023. A bit of an exaggerated statement, but you get the point. But even if you wanted in on that nostalgia factor, the VCS was really no different than a standard Chromebook. It's not like these classic old retro games are graphically demanding or anything. You can probably play them on Google if you really wanted to, which is why it was no surprise that from 2021 to 2022, the estimated sales figures dropped from $2 million to just $200,000. And in December of that year, they decided to completely pull the plug on the VCS console, canceling all of their manufacturing deals, meaning no new consoles were going to be made. However, they have stated that they want to continue supporting the console software and platform itself, but with no new incentives or customer base, the VCS is practically on life support. I think the downfall of the VCS can just be summarized by this one quote I got from a Reddit comment: "It's not a PC, it should have never been marketed as one." And as unfortunate as this failure from Atari was, it's still remembered by those who hold a special place in their heart for them, even if the company is basically beyond saving at this point. Although it doesn't surprise me that people did still enjoy the Atari VCS for what it was, I still have trouble comprehending how people still enjoy or support the next console, the Polymega. On September of 2018, a company by the name of Polymega started taking pre-orders for a new project they called the Polymega. And for starters, it looks like an SNES combined with a PlayStation controller. It advertised itself similarly to the Atari VCS. You can play old retro games not just from cartridges, but also from PS1, Sega CD, and Sega Saturn discs, regardless of region. This was quite a marvelous feat, at least for the Sega Saturn, as that console is notoriously hard to emulate. And just like the VCS, they claimed it could be used for more than just gaming. It could also be used to stream entertainment. Basically, it was the Atari VCS, but instead made by Polymega. Fun fact actually, Atari and Polymega officially became partners in July of 2023. However, unlike the Atari VCS, the Polymega is an egregious and absurdly priced piece of hardware. Let me explain. The Polymega initially started as a pre-order campaign in order to raise money, being sold for $250 at the time. Alright, not that bad. Cheaper than the VCS in fact. However, that price would continue to drastically increase from $250 to $280 to over $300, and right now it is listed at $550, more expensive than a PlayStation 5. Not to mention, on their site it clearly states that you are still in fact pre-ordering the console, which will ship within 12 to 18 weeks, most likely meaning they make them as the orders come in. And that's not all. That $550 you're spending only gets you the base unit, which comes with a controller thankfully, but what it doesn't come with is the ability to play cartridges. The base unit only allows you to slide in and play CDs. If you want to play your classic cartridges, that's going to cost you an extra $80 depending on the cartridge type you have. That's right, each type has their own little extension they call modules, each costing an additional $80 except for the Ultra, which is $90. So hypothetically speaking, if you were to buy all of these separately over time, that will run you $960, or if you want the base unit and all modules in one, $800. And that's on sale, mind you. Normally the price is $865 for this bundle. This is what makes me sick. The fact that they're basically price discriminating to suck as much money out of their consumers through nostalgia bait. Of course, this is just my opinion and others may feel differently. Some people don't mind tossing over $800 just so they don't have to go through the hassle of downloading an emulator. But pricing aside, Polymega have found themselves in a bit of controversy before release. Putting aside constant delays, soon after the console went up for pre-order, the entire website suffered a DDoS attack and was down for several days. This led to many people thinking the site was nothing more than a scam and they had just been had, though the real scam was that the console existed. There was also an issue they faced with Walmart pre-orders. Apparently the team which Polymega had direct communication with at Walmart had been switched with a different one at some point, which led to Polymega basically being ghosted by them altogether, meaning they couldn't fulfill shipments. In order to reconcile this, they posted a couple of stories to their Instagram informing everyone that pre-ordered with Walmart to cancel their orders and instead order it through their official website. They also included a $50 coupon for those transferring their orders, but either way, if you were to reorder the console, you would get your shipment much later than everyone else, though even this date was inaccurate. All of this ultimately led to what I deem as the worst console ever made and what many people will probably deem a forgettable hunk of junk, or at least those that haven't bought one. After all, you usually aren't going to talk bad about a console you spend a bit of money on. To the people who bought and enjoyed the Polymega, power to you. I'm glad you got some fun out of it. Hopefully you bought it for a cheaper price than what it is now. But while I do still maintain respect for those who choose to buy one of these, I can't say the same if you were one of the few people that bought the EVO Smart Console. In 2008, a company named Envisions with a Z announced a new Linux-based console they named the EVO Smart Console, with the initial release date being set for November 20 of that year at a price of $600. And let me show you a quick snippet from their TV commercial at the time.
Game card. And it does this.
Man, TV commercials back in the day really were something else. But as you can see from the 3 pixels on your screen, the console marketed itself as the world's first open source gaming system. Meaning on top of playing and creating video games, you would also be able to download Windows for an additional fee of course, play DVDs like a Blu-ray player, call people, and browse the World Wide Web. This was 2008 mind you, this was still revolutionary at the time. And along with the release of this console, they announced their very own flagship game named Kid Destiny that would be bundled alongside it. Think Astro Playroom for the PS5. However, this game didn't release until much later, and even when it did, I don't think it could really be considered a flagship worthy game. If anything, it looks like a Super Mario Bros. Clone. Now, of course that initial release date came and went with no console to really show for it, because it was really nothing more than just vaporware at the time. For those that don't know, vaporware is basically a concept that isn't yet available, usually because it's still being built, but it's still being sold and advertised as if it were. Think Kickstarter scams like Chronicles of Illyria. That isn't to say, however, that the console didn't actually exist at some point in time. We do have some proof on YouTube that they did actually exist. Take this graphic comparison with the Wii for example. Pretty interesting stuff, at least at first glance. Don't forget you're basically playing on a low-end PC. Then in 2020, we had the first in-depth video on it by these Italian gentlemen here. And as we can see, the console did exist and was given to a real consumer. There's also this Atari Fest video where we can spot a lonely EVO Smart Console box just chilling in the background. Whether the console is still inside of it or not, we'll never know. So by all accounts, the console did exist and there was something there. But according to to the CEO and Wikipedia, only about 10 were ever sold, with sale figures never truly reaching past the low hundreds. The story of the EVO Smart Console is only one small snippet of the absolute wild and convoluted ride that is the Envision's company. And as much as I'd like to go more in depth with the rest of the story, I can't do it justice in this video. It deserves a video of its own, so like and subscribe if you want to see that. Anyways, putting this Blu-ray player looking thing aside, let's look into an actual big name company's attempt at video game consoles with Mattel's HyperScan. In 2006, presumably after seeing the immense success that was the Xbox 360, Mattel wanted a piece of that gaming market pie, and so they announced their own plug-and-play console named the HyperScan. I will give them props for attempting to innovate here. They attempted to combine card collecting with gaming. How it worked was that the console came pre-packaged with one of the worst X-Men fighting games I've ever seen in my life, and if you went out and bought little collectible cards from stores, you can scan them into the game and use those characters to fight your way to the top. Think Skylanders and Amiibos, but a lot more underwhelming. Though of course this predated them, and I wouldn't be surprised if the inspiration came from the HyperScan. In their weirdly made commercial, they promised that more games will be made in the future.
X-Men Game Pack. Other games coming soon, sold separately, rated E10 plus to teen.
However, by its final resting date of 2007, just 1 year later, only 4 other games were ever made and released for the console. This was mainly due to extremely poor sales figures of both the consoles and the games and cards. Too bad, honestly. Maybe with some more tweaking and a bigger budget, we could have seen a Skylanders style game for Pokemon or something. Though for consumers, this is kind of a shitty business model, considering we'd have to constantly buy new cards or add-ons just to keep playing. Why else do you think Skylanders and Disney Infinity failed? To end off this video, I'd like to mention a little special console that I bet literally none of you have ever even heard of. The EVO CT510. I know that just by saying the name, you'd think I was talking about a fucking dishwasher or something, but no, this was a real console. And right off the bat, you may sense a bit of familiarity with this console. It looks like an Xbox 360's Kinect was just built into the console itself, and that's because that's exactly what it was. In this case, the Kinect's motion sensor was actually the controller, and all the games were just poorly made knockoffs of classic Kinect games. The reason you've never heard of this console was because it was only made and sold in China. At the time, video game consoles were actually completely banned from being domestically sold, and so there was an untapped market there. The company EVO, partially owned by Lenovo of all companies, marketed the console as a multimedia exercise console, as opposed to an actual gaming console to avoid being annihilated by the Chinese government. It was priced at the equivalent of $600 US, which was completely idiotic considering that you could get an illegally imported Xbox 360 for the equivalent of $100 cheaper. I'm sure nothing more needs to be said. I mean, just look at this intense gameplay that I had to infiltrate China to get because there's almost no gameplay whatsoever on YouTube. And let me tell you, it's criminal that this was never released in America. Could you imagine, instead of competitive Just Dance, we had competitive only Bust a Move? Anyways, this untapped market was pretty much tapped when China lifted its ban on game consoles, so there was no real need for these kinds of weird consoles anymore. And yeah, pretty much every single console on here failed, not because they were completely useless, except for the Polymega, but more because they just can't compete with Xbox, PlayStation, and Nintendo. At this point, they're really the only ones on top, and they're going to stay on top probably forever. Anyways, I want to make videos going in depth into some of these consoles because some of their stories are absolutely insane. So like and subscribe if you want to see that. All my socials are in the description. Feel free to check them out. I might start streaming on YouTube instead of Twitch because I hate those stupid ads, but I'm still not sure yet. If you like the video, subscribe, like, comment down below, do whatever. Just don't forget about me. I've been Megalohara. You've been watching a man lose his sanity, and ciao ciao.